Hello again, I am Blunty. So, a lot of us nerdier types have known it was coming for some time now, but about 6 days ago we got the official trailer for Marvel Animation's new show, X-Men 97, a direct sequel to the X-Men animated TV series that ran from 1992 for 5 seasons until, well, guess what year it ran till. But sadly, in today's climate of semi-professional idiocy, and in some cases actually just professional idiocy, we've seen a subsequent flood of astonishingly stupid hot takes. The dumbest might be people thrashing and pissing pants about them making the X-Men awoke now. Which, dearest pogo-hopping Jeebus Christmas, some redneck twat humping their keyboard to type out the words of that kind of stuff is just the perfect analogy for how lost and catastrophically media illiterate the so-called right and MAGA types have become. The X-Men were, of course, as any idiot could see, you would think, always what the red hat wearing dullards would call woke. From day one, they were designed and written and intended to be allegorical characters to stand in for minorities of all kinds. I am going to use this post, which I came across this morning, as my framing device here because it sums up in the most succinct yet bewilderingly stupid way what I'm talking about here when I say that the Red Hat's media literacy has been just utterly destroyed. They don't get it. They can't think for themselves anymore. It is buffoonery of the highest order to even try to engage these people anymore. They are so lost and so far away from reality. At one point, the X-Men were Marvel's most popular comic show and toys. They were created to represent people who were different, not to be an allegory for minorities. I'm going to read that last part again for you, because it's a tricky one. They were created to represent people who were different, not to be an allegory for minorities. They were created to represent people who were different, not to be an allegory for minorities. To represent people who were different, not minorities. Are you serious? This is where we're at. I cannot tell anymore what is parody and what is just earnest drivel pouring out of their faces. It's impossible to tell. There is no difference between someone making fun of them and stuff they actually say out loud in public for people to look at. You can't tell anymore. My man. The very definition of minority in this context, as we're talking about people, is people who are different from the majority, from the average, from the normal. Because that's all normal means, the statistical average. Now, let me read some of Stan Lee's own words. I don't think I should have to explain who Stan Lee is at this point in time, do I? You all know exactly who I'm talking about. But specifically, the reason I'm quoting him today is because, of course, he is one of the two people who came up with the X-Men in the first place. There was him, and there was Kirby. But Stan's words are, basically, the main idea was to show that bigotry is really a terrible thing, and we should all get along with each other no matter how different we are. That was the main objective, if you needed an objective for a superhero story. I wanted them, the X-Men, to be diverse. The whole underlying principle of the X-Men was to try to be an anti-bigotry story to show there is good in every person. Now, over and over again, for decades, Stan Lee would repeat this. Pretty much every single interview he ever gave where the subject of the X-Men came up, and the interviewer was asking about the origins of the X-Men, this is the kind of stuff he would say over and over again for decades and decades and decades. Over and over again, the subtext was barely sub at all. It was just text. It was right there on the surface. It was screaming at you. Every single iteration of the X-Men, every era of the X-Men, every medium, comic book, TV, movies, doesn't matter, whatever. Over and over again. The mutant experience of being a minority, of being discriminated against for the fact of their existence, of their birth at all, with them sometimes having to hide their true selves for their own safety from other people, from authority, from governments. or having to be loud and proud while fighting for equality and recognition and empathy and their rights and respect. It is a metaphor for any and every minority, especially for queer stuff. The mutants were very literally born that way, and often only came out or discovered their own personal truth and identity as they came of age as teenagers. In the lore of the comic books, that's when mutant powers would often manifest at puberty. But that too was just an allegory for the experience of being a teenager, especially a teenager who is different. We come of age, we start engaging with the wider world around us, we see other points of view, we hear other perspectives, we start trying to find out who we are as people. And there isn't a teenager on Earth, and especially queers, who couldn't find some common ground with the metaphor of the mutants in the Marvel Universe. I mean, holy crap, man. They flat out lampshaded the entire metaphor 24 years ago in the very first live-action movie where Bobby, aka Iceman, his parents, mum I think it was, someone correct me, I'm pretty sure it was his mum, I haven't watched the movie in a while, but she just flat out sat down and asks her son, have you tried not being a mutant? Which is a direct parody of the old cliche of, have you tried not being gay? Which again, if you don't understand that reference, ask an older queer, Gen X or beyond, from back when being gay was still being called a lifestyle choice by idiots and bigots. It's one of my favourite small moments from the film. It is tone perfect. What a wonderful little joke and social commentary all balled up into one. It's glorious. And one of the countless moments where the subtext of the mutant experience being a metaphor for things like being queer is just, hey, look over here. This is the metaphor. Do you get it? Do you get it? Do you get it? You can't possibly miss it, right? Do you get it? Do you get it? Being a mutant is a metaphor. Whee! That appeal of outsiders fighting to be recognized for who and what they are, pushing back against bigotry and mistrust and ignorance and fear and hate. And in the framing of Magneto and his followers, showing the kind of hatred and violence and extremism you can generate in a minority class when you keep dehumanizing them. How easy it can be to radicalize and become the violence you were trying to avoid in the first place. Because that's the other thing X-Men tries to teach us, and it is one of the most important things. None of these characters are just evil for the sake of being evil, like, you know, properly old school comic book villains were, nor are any of them wholly good. They're just people, like everyone else. And how you treat other people, especially those who aren't exactly like you, is the measure of your own worth. That's how you tell the bad guys from the good guys, how they treat other people. And if you allow hatred or fear to drive your actions, or convince yourself that you are superior to someone else because you or they were born different, then you are the bad guy. You've made a terrible mistake. Xavier doesn't hate Magneto. They're not sort of arch enemies in the classic comic book sense. What Xavier wants is a peaceful acceptance of mutant kind, and he wants Magneto to understand that because Magneto has power and influence over other mutants. He wants the message of peaceful coexistence, of understanding to spread. And to get to those other mutants that have been radicalized, he needs Magneto to understand. Magneto, though, at least in most versions of his story, has been so traumatized by the hatred his kind receive, it's hard for him, nearly impossible for him, to see a path out of it beyond the destruction of normal humanity. Like, there's no fixing it. We gotta nuke and pave, get rid of all the normies, so we can be, because we're never ever going to be safe while they're still huffing about there. Xavier's on the other side going, no, Magneto, listen, all we need to do is teach them. The problem is not hatred, the problem is ignorance. And that is the point of all of it. Neither the humans nor the mutants are monolithic as a culture. They don't all believe the same thing just because they're part of the same group. They're all individuals, they're all people, just dealing with a horrific, violent, unfair and hate-filled world in various ways. Some allow their pain through empathy to make them kind, and some let their pain make them cruel. And it's all through the pantomime lens of a comic book, so it's all exaggerated and pulled to extremes and fantasticals, but at the core of it, it is just that. What you let the world turn you into, what you do with your pain. Because being in pain, having trauma, is not a competition. It's not an Olympics. It's not who has the most. That's the wrong point of view. It's not constructive. It's what you do with that and how you let that make you treat other people. That's what the X-Men is about. Diversity and humanity, and the bad guys are the ones who keep screaming for suppression and extermination of the other, regardless of which that other is, whether that's humanity or mutants on either side of the fence. Now, I don't think that people screeching right now online about the new X-Men show, calling it woke or whatever their problem is with it, actually see themselves. Because if you care enough about X-Men to allow yourself to be publicly mad that a new series of cartoons reflects the current socio-political framings of oppressed minorities, then you have never even understood X-Men to begin with. Because it has always been that. In every single decade it has existed in, it is always, and I mean always, right back to the very beginning, reflected the current socio-political framings of oppressed minorities. That is the entire point of the X-Men. Stan Lee himself has been screaming it in your face for decades. And if he was alive today, he'd still be screaming it. But if you're one of these people, you never understood X-Men to begin with. Because you are the bad guys. Wolverine would bare his claws at you, and Professor X would pity you. And you can be damn sure that Stan Lee would pity you too. And I would feel sorry for Stan Lee because he tried so hard to make it so clear. Like, again, the subtext was barely sub. Like, here's the surface, here's the text, here's the subtext. It's just it's millimeters from the surface. And sometimes the subtext goes, hi, look at me, I'm the subtext, hi, look at me. How these people don't understand, or deliberately misunderstand, to try and, make rage engagement online. It is silliness. I'd be so embarrassed to be these people. So embarrassed. Oi. Thank you to the patrons. I'm Bloody. I'll see you next time. Woof. Schnicked.